everybody. Good morning, good afternoon
or good
evening,
whatever.
Thank you for joining us today and showing up to this talk. We are Sari and Becka. Maybe a little introduction of who we are in case some of you don't know us or you're just discovering who we are. My name is Sari, and I'm a mom to a 7-year-old unschooler, self-directed learner. I am directing an agile learning center here in Mexico. I was also directing one in New York, which was my home, and now Mexico is my home. And joining forces with Rebecka Koritz. And what brings me to this work is really a passion for free learning. And wanting to be the best parent and best facilitator and best adult in this world that I can be for youth, really believing that we can change our future through the way that we're looking at learning and through the way that we are supporting learners. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of self-reflection. And so, Becka and I have an organization called Radical Learning, where we support folks like you and ourselves to do this work, to advocate for freedom, anti-oppression, and supporting our free learners and ourselves in that journey.
Thank you, Sari. So I'm Becka. I am Swedish by birth, but I've lived almost 20 years in Mexico now. I am from the beginning a trained teacher, but I ditched that a long time ago. I have a son who is almost 16, and he has been unschooling for almost 6 years now. And I have started a lot of different educational projects, but the crown jewel would definitely be Explora, our Agile Learning Center that I no longer need to direct because Sari is doing it for us. So basically working a lot with parents, trainers, facilitators, and coaching parents in groups, all giving a lot of courses, workshops, and trainings in order to help grown-ups to shift so that we better can support kids' freedom, because that's what I'm about. It's like kids' freedom and their right to be who they are and choose what they need in this world, and without our tools of oppression and control. This is what we're doing. And we also have a podcast that is called Radical Learning Talks. So every 2 weeks, we release a new episode. And just today, we're releasing an episode on fear, like all the fears that we carry as adults.
Yeah, and I think, if you're embarking on this unschooling journey for the first time, or like beginning to, or you've been doing this for years, support and community is so important. So we really hope to support you all in your journeys and connect and hear stories through the work that we're doing. They're amazing leaders, and we feel super honored to be doing this, today, along with some amazing thought leaders in self-directed education and the freedom movement in terms of liberated learning. So we'll jump right into it. So our topic today is, what are equitable relationships and why are they so important, and specifically in self-directed education? And we're thinking, in order to really talk about it, we need to define, like, what are equitable relationships? Like, what does that term mean? And I think the best way to define it is actually to talk about what it's not. And we live in a world and in a society right now that is based on fear. It is based on control, and it is based on a structure that looks like this. It is based on a pyramidal structure that is very top down. There are few on the top that are determining the lives and how we're all living, what we should do, how we should be. And it's very much like power over. And what happens there is that the relationship is not at the center. It's really about production. It's about, what part you play in this big machine of the world. And
producing
exactly.
Results.
Outcome. It's never really about process. It's about outcome. And the work that we do and what we're hoping to talk about in this chat is how those structures affect our relationships and our parenting and our support of youth and our families and our relationships in general, because these structures are tools and structures of oppression. It's where we don't have the freedom to be who we are, to explore who we are, to decide for ourselves. And we pass these structures down to our kids, whether we have kids in our, we're working with kids in a center, or we have our own children. And we do it kind of unintentionally sometimes, because there are a lot of things that we internalize, a lot of programmings that we internalize. And, a word that we use a lot in self-directed education is adultism. And so what we are trying to fight here and trying to find different ways of operating is, to do something different, where it's not about I'm the adult and I decide. And because how many of us have probably heard that, growing up, like, well, I'm the adult and what I say goes. Well, okay, but why? There's no room for curiosity. There's no room for dialogue, and there's no room for relationship. And really what relationship is about relating. And so these dynamics, these pyramidal structures that determine how we are relating with one another, seep into how we're talking to each other, how we're looking at each other, the stories that we create in our minds about one another as situations arise. And what we're doing is we're turning that pyramid into this. We're turning that pyramidal structure into one of collaboration and support and curiosity and hearing. But really, from this is because it happens because there's the adult agenda is on top.
Yeah, the adult's agenda is always on top. And I would say also the adult's needs. My need as a mom to look like a perfect parent. What will others say? What will others think? My job goes before my kids' needs, because of course I need to earn money in order to sustain my family. And that is true, but how it plays out in the family can be different. It doesn't have to be through the scheme where kids have to do as they've been told, where they have to be quiet, not disturb, just obey the adult agenda, because otherwise there will be consequences. They will be scolded, they will be threatened, they will be coerced into punishments and other kinds of things. It's punishments, rewards. We're using plenty of tools in order to manipulate our kids to do what we think is best for them. And that is not ever going to create an equitable relationship. The only thing we're going to create by that is actually a lack of trust between the child and the adult. And we're going to create more generations that are growing up through oppression and who will internalize these pyramidal structures and pass them on to other generations. And really, what we're talking about here, equitable relationships, is instead of having this hierarchy, maybe having it more like a circle or even like a flat thing where we don't have the same kind of hierarchy, where the focus is really the relationship at the center and connecting with each other. And we do that through curiosity. And we also do it by understanding that we all have needs. I have needs as the adult. And my kids probably has the same kind of needs. And what can we do in order to meet those needs so that we all can be in a win-win situation? It's about really, for me, to develop mutual respect, mutual support. And we do that through authenticity, through openness, curiosity, and freedom to be who we are and set our adult agenda aside, where many times we as adults, we think that we know who our kids should be. And we don't believe that that is true.
I mean, how could we know who they're going to be? They're their own person, and I think a lot of the conflict that we have with any human is when we think we know who they are, we think we know what they need, we want to impose that thought onto them when we're really not taking the time to be like detectives perspectives in a way and figure out like, okay, one, what is happening for me in that moment, right? So we talk a lot about conscious communication, otherwise known as nonviolent communication, but really understanding first that behind every behavior, there's a need. And if we're going to be supporting learners to be their authentic, free selves, our role as supporters, our role as parents is, as Becka was saying, to understand the need that this person, this human in front of us has.
Yeah, because if we don't, we will look at their behavior as something very problematic that needs to be changed. And I mean, we see this all the time through our Agile Learning Center. How behaviors, like especially I think kids that come in from the outside who have been in a more conventional schooling setting, carry with them these structures, and they can come out in a way that looks like bullying or like unkindness because they haven't learned how to relate to other persons apart from those structures. So it's really a lot about culture creating. That's what we do at the center, but it's also what we do in our families, like creating a culture that is built on understanding that the behavior is never a problem, but rather just an indication of an unmet need. And so whatever our child is doing, we can look at our child and try to figure out what is happening underneath that.
And I think, how do we do this? How do we move towards more equitable relationships? We've talked about why it's important. It's important in our day-to-day lives so that we can connect, right? Because relationships based on control, relationships based on power over it are basically the opposite of connecting. It's, a top-down approach. It is, somebody telling you what you need to do, and there's no room for the individual. Whereas relationships based on connection, where you're actually relating, that's why it's called a relationship, is based on this lack of hierarchy. It's like, we're equal, we're even, but that's really hard, right? It's easy to say. So how do we get there? And I think the first step is really understanding where we come from. And, when I preface this talk by saying, like, this is hard work. This isn't like, I'm going to choose to be an unschooler, or I'm going to just send my kid to Summerhill and they're all good. Everything's, the work comes when you realize, like, whoa, I, as the adult here, have a heck ton of work that I need to do to look at where I came from, to look at the programmings that I've internalized, to look at how that pyramidal structure shows up in my life, like through the ways that I'm talking to people, even my partner, how I'm partnering, how I choose to talk to people at work. And so I think, the only way to break these cycles is to self-reflect and to understand first where we come from. So what were the relationships like in our lives growing up? What were we heard? Were we listened to? Were we free?
Supported?
Yeah. And I hear Vidal is saying also working on yourself continuously. Yeah, it's like non-stop. So
Yeah.
It's like whenever parents come and say, oh, I just want to drop off my kid at the center.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, well, it could work, but it's really confusing for the kid, because then they come into an environment where they're being respected as a human equally, on the same level. They're being heard, they're being supported. We're asking them questions based on curiosity and understanding and connection and mutual respect and supporting their independence. And then if they go home and it's like a totally different world, it's like, wow. Talk about culture shock.
Yeah, plus the parents tend to freak out because they don't understand how this operates, how this works. Like, how can we do this? And I would say that is like where the challenge lies. It's always us. It's never about the kid. And that is why we're focusing so much on looking into these patterns.
Yeah, and you have to, and I think for me, what's been really hard is taking that step to shift that paradigm, because it's maybe your family isn't supportive of the way that you choose to parent, or the way that you are facilitating, or this new shift in communication. And a lot of it is going back to ancestral and childhood generational traumas, so we hold on to a lot of the patterns and a lot of the behaviors and actions that maybe have been passed down to us from generation to generation. So it's a lot of deep reflective healing work, and
there's a lot to unpack.
A lot.
And it's all the time. And I think also it's hard many times in the family, between the partners, like mom, dad, might have really opposite thoughts on what is the best for the kids. And so like once you start doing this work, can really provoke a lot of upset feelings also in the family, between the adults, because they might not be on the same page. They might not share the same understanding. And obviously the easy way out is just continue doing what generation after generation after generation has done. But that is not how we can set the world free. We need to let our kids grow up in a very different setting. And that is why it's so important, I think, to maybe first go back to ourselves and try to think about what it was like to be a kid. Did we have these adults that loved us unconditionally and supported us? Like, go into that and reflect, and then look at, for instance, like, do we really like hanging out with our parents if they were very authoritarian? Most likely we don't have a very good relationship with them. Or maybe we had one authoritarian parent and one who was more equitable, connecting and creating relationship. And most likely now, when we're adults, we prefer hanging out with that one. And I think that here, like, the big question is really, what kind of relationships do we want to have with our children?
What kind of relationships, do we want to have with ourselves?
And with people in general, and remembering that children are people. There is no difference. They're just smaller humans, but they're still humans. And so I think that it's really important to see that we can do this at home. We can do this in schools or alternative schools, learning centers, because that's where these patterns play out. That's where the kids will meet the pyramid. It's at home, it's at school, and as adults at home or in a different learning environment, or in a traditional school too, that's fine. If you start focusing on connecting with the child and on relating to the child and putting the relationship at the center, you will definitely start having a different kind of relationship with this child. And so I think we need to ask ourselves that question again, like, what kind of relationship do we want to have with children? Do we want them to fear us? Do we want them to shy away from us? Or do we want them to trust us, to confide in us, and to come to us whenever they have challenges in their lives or problems that arise? What kind of relationships do we want to have?
And I think in order to do that, we have to be really humble. We have to come off of that pedestal that we put ourselves on, if that's happening, or really examine how adultism is playing out in our lives, how these patterns, how this structure that we are internalizing without knowing it, sometimes really subconsciously, how it's playing out. And one thing I really want to talk about, Becka, is trust. Is the role that trust plays in building equitable relationships. And so I think at the foundation of self-directed, free, liberated learning, whatever you want to define it as, is trust. And it's the trust in the human that is in front of you and their potential. And I think that our system, our world right now, and for many, many years, I mean, that's why the school system was created, was for the opposite of that. The conventional system I'm talking about was the opposite of that. It was to churn out like this perfect, obedient little citizen that
didn't have any free will or any interest in doing anything that wasn't just obeying orders.
Yeah. And where was the trust in that? Where was the trust in this human's potential? And so it didn't exist. And that what we're doing is we are reclaiming that trust in ourselves and in each other. And so it's like this process, this parallel process of doing the work ourselves to be able to support another, learning different tools of liberation, recognizing the tools of oppression that we use, learning new tools of liberation, communication, and at the end of the day, trusting ourselves.
Yeah, and that is really hard because we were taught that we couldn't be trusted as children. So
Yeah.
it's really difficult. And at the same time, I do believe that the trust bit is so fundamental, and I can see it, in the children. And that when you have been in a very pyramidal relationship with your children or with kids in a learning setting, it will take time to break those cycles, and it will take time to start building that trust. Because if the kid has learned that we can't be trusted as adults, it's like, I look at it as an investment. It's like every time I do something that can create trust with a child, I'm like investing in the trust bank of the kid. And so, like with time, you will have a big investment. And if you mess up as an adult, the kid will forgive you more easily. But if you have almost nothing in the kid's trust bank, whoa, like you make a mistake and trust is even more broken, and it will be harder and harder to get back there. That said, it is far from impossible, because I think that children really long for these connections with us, and they want these connections with us. And so if we do this work and they can start trusting us, it takes time, but they do get there eventually.
Yeah. And I think also it comes back to this piece about the needs, right? Like, our role as adults in youth's lives or in any relationship is not to guess, it's to ask. We can't guess that we know what a person's need is and then act accordingly. We can only ask. And so I think understanding always that the goal is to understand the need of the person in front of you. So if you're in a center supporting youth, if you're a parent, always with this lens of what does this person need right now and how can I support them? The goal is not to fix it, but to understand and to connect. And again, relationship, relate. And we can only relate if we're curious, like super curious. So, in the center, when something's happening, when there's a conflict between kids, like my role is not to solve it for them. My role is to come with curiosity and, not as the adult that's going to come in and say, no, you guys can't be arguing right now. And you better do this and you better do that because I'm the adult. It's, whoa, we're all equals here. We're humans trying to figure it out, trying to live together, and we want to live harmoniously, right? So what's going on? What's happening? What happened? How do you feel? What do you need? Let's make an agreement. And gosh, imagine if the world worked like that. That's, you guys are all here because you believe in that. And that gives me so much hope for a different future. But I think that's the work that we're all doing.
Yeah. And in order to do that, we need to take accountability of our past, and we need to take accountability of our stuff. And that is hard work. And I understand that might be like one of the obstacles on the road, that maybe this is why people have many people have a hard time doing it, because it takes courage. Because you have to get really raw with yourself. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be able to look at your mistakes and not beat yourself up, but rather come from compassion and be like, I didn't know better at the time, and now I want to choose a different path. And yeah, it isn't easy, but it is possible. And we've seen so many parents do this journey, and it's wonderful, because when the parents do it, or the facilitators at a center, when they do that journey, it immediately affects the relationship with the children. And when that happens, wow, it's bliss.
Yeah.
It's bliss.
It's freedom. And that's what we're all advocating for. It's being heard and it's connecting. And again, it's not using tools of oppression, it's using tools of liberation, which come from curiosity and trust.
And I think also asking, who is this person?
Right.
Like wanting to get to know a child. But then I realized just this last year that we seldom have that curiosity with each other as adults.
With
ourselves, yeah. I noticed this not long ago at all, that we don't in general engage with each other in that way. And so, of course, we don't with kids either. It's so much more about like focusing on what we have or what we do, but not so much on what we feel. So if I say, hey, what's up? And someone tells me, oh my God, my house burnt down yesterday. I feel awful. It's like, oh, okay, wow, the sun is out. We can't deal with that because we don't know really how to deal with big emotions or how to connect with them or ourselves when those emotions come up.
So Becca, what I'm hearing you say is equitable relationship is meeting the emotion head on as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's about curiosity, it's about trust, it's about recognizing where we come from and taking accountability of that. It's about meeting the emotion and being, I'd say, fearless too. We mentioned,
or feel the fear and do it anyway. It's okay to have the fear, but to be able to look beyond it. And I think it's also about recognizing that we all need to be heard, seen, understood, accepted the way we are, respected for who we are, and fully supported as adults and as children. And so the thing is, I think that when I see parents try to force children to do it their way, their adultist way, it's because we as adults, we have this need. We want the kid to support us to be able to go to work on time, for instance, right? But we don't get that the kid also needs to feel supported. And this is where equitable relationships come in, because it's about recognizing that we are humans. We share the same needs, and how can we meet those needs?
Yeah, I want to address what's being talked about in the chat because it's super important. It's like we need to learn about emotions, and also children need to learn how to identify, and most adults are children, including me. Yeah, I mean, and that's breaking that paradigm, and that's breaking the cycle, right? When we recognize like we are the same, actually.
Yeah.
We are the same. And, we all have our inner child and we all have our past. And so taking accountability for that is saying like, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to recognize, what is playing out? What are the patterns that are playing out? And our goal is to identify the feelings and the needs. And that is hard work. And it's even harder if you're an adult, a grown adult, and you have never done that your entire life. You've been taught how to not do that. Like we live in a society, and we, there are generations like, that like talking about your feelings, like
I was having dinner yesterday with a friend, and she said, ooh, to feel feelings, no. And we laughed about it because she knows she doesn't like it, but at the same time she also knows she has to, because there's no other way around it. And if we can put the relationship in the center, it means that we are connecting on all these really profound levels. And it's still my absolute conviction that if the world would function like that, we would create world peace in a couple of generations.
Absolutely.
Because it's not about this power over, it's about power with, and it changes everything.
And I think what it's about is helping to support learners, children to be free. And the only way that we can support somebody to be free is to be free ourselves. So, helping kids to build their self-esteem, their belief in themselves, is only going to come through us asking questions, right? And understanding their worlds. And we can only do that if we're doing that work ourselves. So I want to also have time for questions and answers, because I see some hands and you guys are sharing a lot in the chat. So let's open it up. I think Marulia, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing names incorrectly. I'm really bad with that.
Hi guys. Hi. It is Leah. Leah, actually. I couldn't change the name. It's Leah Zorzu. I'm from Greece. Okay. And I connect so much with what you're saying. 7 years ago, I was running my tech startup, and my sister, who was younger, was diagnosed with a rare disease. And my reaction was to live my life and go to help her. Okay. And after 3 months, my sister had a plan, and I was depressed. And through working, and at 40 years of age, it was the first time in my life that I asked for help. And, from that moment, I realized that my role was to run to save others, the role that I had and I was carrying for 40 years was the one that actually made me to react like this. And, a whole journey started, as you say, I couldn't connect to my emotions back then at all, because I was raised up not to connect with my emotions. And since then, so many things have changed. I feel I have found myself. Actually, I lost my sister 2 years ago. And I think that she passed away and she was ill, thank you, because she was trying to fulfill other people's expectations. And because of the work and because of everything that happened, now for the last year, I'm helping people all around the world experientially connect with their emotions, find their truth, connect with themselves, understand who they are truly. Because, especially when we give birth, suddenly we see ourselves opposite. The child shows us the truth and we don't recognize it because we believe that we behave in another way. So, yeah, I am with you 1000%. I'm doing my part, and, it's not that people know of this. I think what I see is that they reach rock bottom, and this is where especially mothers and fathers, but this is where they start doing something, because they have grown up believing that they should fight life on their own. They should do everything and anything. They should be there for everybody. There is a lot of guilt to taking care of ourselves, because if we start feeling, we may say that I don't want to spend the day cooking or cleaning or taking care of everyone else. I want to spend some of my time alone. So, yeah, I totally believe this. I have seen how my life has changed, and I help people. Actually, I help business owners who have small businesses, and they are 45, 50 years of age, and they want to finally get the life that they dream. And what I have to say is that you can do it. Even if you're 50, 55, or 60, you can start. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And I was thinking also about what Viral said about, like, in India, men can't cry or be sad. And that is something that we see all the time. I think especially here in Latin America, where men can't be weak, because seen as weak is like the most shameful thing ever for men. And so it's about how we're dealing also with our sons. It's so important to give them the tools to feel and to be able to talk about their emotions, because they need to be the ones that can break these cycles. But in order to do that, we need to support them. Yeah. I don't want my son to wait until he's 55, even though I know that, he could do it then. I want him to know this now.
Absolutely. And also something else that you brought up, Leah, is this, waiting until we hit rock bottom to make a change. I see that a lot, I think especially with schools, parents that are, they don't know what to do other than what they're used to doing, which is sending their kid to a conventional school when it's like not working. My son has never been in a conventional setting, because as he was growing, I paid attention to the person he was, and I knew that his spirit would be crushed by the system. He is an active kid, 5 minutes in sitting in a desk, he would go crazy. So, but a lot of us don't know what to do, like that there are other options, and we're in communities or in families that are just like, keeping this pattern going. And so it takes a lot of courage to break free from that and to say, no, I want to do something else. And it takes showing up to things like this and, reaching out to people and creating communities. But there are places out there. There are Summerhill exists, and it's 100 years, amazing. And there are other agile learning centers and Sudbury schools, and people that are actually just doing it on their own with their families. And so I think not waiting until your kid is depressed and, you know, suicidal because they're in a system that doesn't work for them, is, you know, there are other options. And you see this a lot in Sweden, especially.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because in Sweden there are no options.
Yeah.
It is absolutely mandatory to go to school, and they have been strangling any kind of alternatives. And so Montessori is now almost ordinary school, and Waldorf is struggling. Self-directed education is not, it's not allowed by the law. And so I can see here, for instance, several people who have actually had to leave Sweden in order to be able to give their kids the freedom that they need. Because that is human need. We talk about it as human right, but actually I would say, yeah, it should be a right, but it is definitely a need.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mia, for sharing. Anybody else? I think I see a hand here. Daniel or Daniel?
Yeah, hello. Nice to meet you. I'm also in Mexico, but I am Mexican. So I love listening to what you have been sharing, and I agree completely. And I think that the human side is like the most important part in our lives. If you're little or adult, I mean, it's just the main thing. So I'm really, I want to like listen to your perspective on like building your school when the human is the center of that. And then that goes against like the culture, today's culture of like what is valued most is making money, having recognition, winning things, like the competition, crushing the others. So how like your school, the families that come to your school are because they all have already found that the human side is more important? Or do you have like a lot of families that really make the transition as they are in your school? Like what has been that journey for you?
Wow, that's a really interesting
Great
question, Daniel. And as you know, like here in Mexico, we can't officially be a school because we would have to obey the orders of the Ministry of Public Education, which we refuse to do. And so it's all on the side, but I think it's been like a really long process. Our Agile Learning Center is on its sixth cycle. I can't say that word. And yeah, it's been a big process. I think it's been like specifically with parents who have younger children, it was easier in the beginning because they were still not freaked out by, oh my God, when are they going to learn how to read and write? But as soon as they approach something that looks like school age, that's when they would start freaking out. And I think it's been a long process. And now we're kind of finding the balance where we have to be super picky in order to basically just be in alignment with the families, because each and every time we try to take in a family that says that they're aligned, but they really aren't, we notice it from the beginning and they never stay.
I have a lot of thoughts around this, Tanya, as directing the center and having directed in 2 different countries, because it's very similar. And, you know, there are some fellow ALC directors here and facilitators on the call. Crystal, big shout out to you. Thanks for joining. And Luz, who is a facilitator at our center too, can speak to this. Like it's hard because you're constantly balancing like sustainability, like I need to pay my bills and I need people to actually enroll in this program with the values of your center, right? So it's like this year I have taken a very different approach, which is a no fear approach, because I realized like in doing my work in self-reflecting and understanding, okay, I got a lot of fear around the money part. I got a lot of fear around the sustainability part. And so therefore I'm saying yes to this family, also because I believe in people and I want this to work. I want to support this family and these kids, but knowing deep down inside based on the questions, you know, like when are they going to read and write? It's not really what we do here. We don't, that's not it. We think about learning in a different way, but still accepting families into our program that I knew weren't quite aligned because it was based on the fear. And so I took a no fear approach this year, and I actually had some really hard conversations with parents when I was like, okay, are you prepared for your child to be playing Legos for a year? Like, are you okay with that? Like, what do you think about that? And based on the response, you know, are you okay that maybe we'll be talking about race and gender
and
sex
sexuality
and, you know, all of these things that might come up, because those are the realities of our everyday world. Not that we're like pushing it down their throats, but if it comes up, it comes up. Like, are you prepared? And so being really real and raw about who we are and what we have to offer,
what we stand for,
what our values are. Oh my gosh, somebody could help with money. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, just being very honest, because again, we're asking for trust, right? That's what we're working for, is trust. But if we're not honest with ourselves about what's motivating us, and if we are just motivated for the money, or if we are, you know, fearful, that's where we're going to stay. And those are the kinds of families we're also going to attract.
And I would like to add on something to this that has been really like challenging for me to come here to Mexico. And I started working at one of the universities in the city of Oaxaca, because I'm a trained French teacher. So I was in charge of the French program at the time. And I saw the level of education on my students, and I could compare them to students in Sweden. And I was like, oh my God, like, and I started understanding the pyramid. I started understanding what happens when it's too authoritarian, and how that just rips out any kind of initiative taking or sense of responsibility, because you don't even own don't own your own learning, right? And so when I saw that, and I wanted to start my first alternative school, I wanted to be so inclusive, and I wanted to include everyone. And in this state where we live in Mexico, we have like the biggest, I think we have 16 different ethnic groups. And we were so open in like pulling them in, and they didn't want to. And it wasn't until I watched the movie Schooling the World where I understood. I was like, oh my God, I'm a white European, and they're reacting to me because of 500 years of colonization and oppression. I don't have anything to offer them. But so we're like really.
And not only that, it's not like, who am I to come in and want to change things?
Exactly.
Like, I'm just repeating those cycles of oppression.
Absolutely. And so that was a hard blow for me, but also it's hard sometimes because we are pulling in a lot of families from abroad that are super interested, and not so many locals. Again, because there is no interest, I would say, from them to want us to show them another way. It has to come from within, I think. And so I think that many people that come to our center, they're like, this is so white. And that is not our intention.
No.
It's just, we can't either like put our programmings on top of other people in a different culture. And it's really hard to try to balance that out. It's not easy.
What has been helpful is just, you know, asking the communities, you know, like participating in the community, right? To, you know, like we go out, we take excursions, we are, you know, picking up garbage, we're recycling, like we're doing our part in the community, but without this, like, you know, we are here to save any, you know, no. And so I think, I mean, this is like a whole other topic this is like a whole other topic, but I think it is important to understand culture and again, take accountability for our past and our role in history, and, you know, what that, you know, what effect that has.
Yeah, because we're wearing ethnocentric glasses. That's how I look at it. You know, we're wearing these ethnocentric glasses, and it's really hard to look beyond them and to have that openness. And I would also say, like, to be humble, to understand that we're coming from the outside to a country that wasn't ours. It is mine now. I feel like I'm part of this, but at the same time, I will always use these ethnocentric glasses and just have that awareness and take responsibility for it.
Yeah, and have dialogue around it. Like, so ask questions. But yeah, I don't know if this is answering your question, Danielle. We kind of like went off into this.
Oh, no, thank you. Yeah, it did. I mean, yeah. it's a very complex thing, and I have been living through the same dilemmas in many years. So I would love to connect like offline with you and share stories and see what we can do together.
Awesome. Yeah,
Thank you.
sounds. Anybody else have a question or anything they'd like to share? The chat.
Yeah, I don't know how to do this. I don't know where
Sorry.
the chat disappeared. I did something. There it is, chat.
Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, if there are no like direct questions, maybe we could talk about why it's so important with equitable relationships in self-directed education.
Why it's important to have them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we're striving for, you know. I mean, going back a little bit to this topic of diversity and you know, taking accountability for our role in history and of our past, you know, we are trying to change this structure of oppression. We're trying to change this structure of top down. And the only way we can do that is if we are, again, centering the relationship, centering, you know, understanding of history, of past experiences, of, you know, understanding emotions. And, you know, I'm super grateful for this dialogue about the importance of emotional connection, you know, and I think that that's really lacking in our conventional system, is space for that dialogue and for kids to be heard. And for, you know, when you're one teacher with 30 kids, like how the heck are you going to think about the individual needs of every child? It's wild. And then we are not giving them tools to be able to help each other, to support each other in understanding their emotions and their needs. So it's a really backwards system, but I'm super grateful that there are centers out there and people that are doing this work to change that. And I think that that's really what it comes down to, is holding space for that. And also, Danielle, to answer your question as well, like we work a lot with families. So we have parent circles. We do something called Change Up, which is an agile learning tool that a lot of agile learning centers use. It's ways to co-create intentional culture. So we come together and share awarenesses with each other and come together and find solutions. And we do this on all levels. We do this with our staff weekly. We do this with the kids weekly. We do this with parents on a monthly basis. And so really creating space for dialogue and being like, hey, what's up? What's going on? What are you feeling? What are you needing? And that's something that it doesn't happen, you know, it doesn't happen in our society often. And so, you know, something I personally love to do is actually go into families' homes and set up a process with them and show them this tool so that they can also use it at home and begin to have dialogue with one another and begin to understand that there are needs underneath the behavior. And it's only through understanding those needs that we can relate to one another.
And I don't know, Sari, if there's any other way to support self-esteem in kids, for them to be happy with who they are, like regardless of what they produce or, you know, the results that they're getting in their lives, or even like to become free, independent thinkers. If we don't have dialogues with them, if we don't have conversations with our kids where we go deep and broad, how are they going to develop this? And I know it's a question that many people ask us, but how will they develop critical thinking? Well, because we create all these circumstances for them to reflect instead of telling them what to think, which is obviously very, very different.
And we're not asking them what they think either.
No, and we're okay with them questioning us. It's okay, you know, and I think that many adults are like, no, adult, they can't question me. And I think it's super important that they understand that they can. We're not right all the time. We mess up every day. That's okay.
And I think that that's part of, you know, what welding equitable relationships is about. It's like, I'm not better than you. I'm not better than you because I come from somewhere else, or because I am this or I'm that, or because I'm an adult. I actually mess up all the time. Like, you have no idea how many times I apologize to my son, and in return, like he's developing empathy. He's learning empathy through me saying, you know what, man, I really messed that one up. Like, can we try that again, please? Like, I did not mean to say it in that way. And actually, this is what's going on for me. And this is why I'm doing this. And so, somebody mentioned on the chat, like breaking cycles, that's the work we're doing. It's big work. And so we can only do that if we're really raw and honest with ourselves when we do mess up. Like, oh man, I bombed that one. Like, let's try it again.
And there's so much fear in not going there. This fear that is holding back adults. We think that we need to be perfect. We think that kids will only learn if we have like this perfect facade where everything looks impeccable. And then we're trying to control ourselves and we try to control them. And we're coming from fear and control. But we want to move in to trust and freedom. And we can only do that by being real, by being authentic and open.
And I think by being quiet sometimes, like observing, and this also goes back to that dialogue about, opening up centers. Like, we can't assume that we can come into a community and into a culture that might be different than ours, or maybe not, but start anything without asking and getting feedback from the people that we're working with or the community that we're coming into. It's like those are systems of oppression that we're repeating over and over again. We can't do that. So I think a lot of the work that we do in our center is like holding space, creating space to have those dialogues. And sometimes they're really hard dialogues. Sometimes things come up that are like, whoa, this is a big topic here. Like, I'm actually not equipped to I need help. I need support to talk about this, or, I don't know, shed some light, help me out. Like, I don't know everything. I'm not on the, like, that's not what this is about. We're here together. So, but creating space for those conversations is really important.
Absolutely. Any more questions before we leave you guys? It's been so good to have you.
Fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
I see.
I
Cool.
have-
Photo. Sifan, is that you?
Yes.
Is that you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, my connection was a bit bad, so I started coming in and dropping out. But so I resonate very much with what you say, and like NVC and things, because we are also practicing that. I was just wondering now, if a child comes to the center and the parents are practicing power over parenting and are not receptive to transitioning to power, which takes some time, of course, right? But if they're not receptive to making the change, how would you respond? How would you like say that you can't accept the child? And also, especially, how would you get this across to them in a non-threatening way, where they don't feel that their parenting approach is being attacked and they are that you're finding fault with them? So how do you empathetically connect with them and help them through that?
What a brilliant, beautiful question. Thank you. Because it's something we're constantly asking ourselves, always checking, our like how we're communicating. I want to be mindful. We are supposed to be out of this room in 2 minutes. So Sifan, if you want to shoot your email over to us, and I'm happy to also connect with you outside of here. Or maybe we could talk about this on one of our podcasts too, but in case we can't get through everything. I think it's, in my experience, families will have a hard time at some point, with shifting. And so what's really important is not to shame or blame anybody. It's to, in that dialogue, also try to move from a structure of like, I know more than you. And so therefore, what you're doing as a parent is wrong. It's like, man, I've been there. I know, I hit my kid. I did it, like, I'm with you. And so this is what's working for me and for us and why. And so I think if we approach families from a standpoint of like, what you're doing is wrong and you need to adopt this different way, like, no, nothing's going to change, but really sharing the tools that we're using, you know, in a way that is not shame or blame them or make them defensive. So using conscious communication tools in sharing our observations, asking them how they feel, what's challenging for them, most likely than none, they're probably experiencing some conflict, inner conflict.
Yeah. I mean, because parents can want something very clearly and still be doing everything that goes away from what they really want. We actually created a training for parents and adults in order to be able to look at these patterns and understand them without taking it personally. And that training is called The Shift. And we're giving it end October here in Mexico because it is needed. We need help in order to do this. And it's really an amazing training that goes deep, and it goes really, really into like, being able to identify these patterns and deal with them and start breaking free from them without taking it personally, because it isn't personally. These are internalized structures that we're all carrying. So how can we let go of them? Well, there's so many different ways, but this is one.
Yeah, I want to be really mindful of getting out of this room on time so that the next presenters can have their space. But Sifan, I think also I'll leave with this question: what kind of relationship do you want to have with your kid? So if you are talking to a family and it's like maybe they're having some struggles, just ask that question. Maybe, what kind of relationship do you want to have with your kid? And are the tools you're using going to get you there, or do you need maybe to make some shifts? We're here to support you. We're in this together. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been amazing.
Hi, friend over there in Danielle's world. Thank you guys. Our email is in. Did you put?
I put it in.
Learning?
Yeah,
okay.
No, let's put Explore.
Oh, yeah, and then also like info, or we'll put our site in case. Reach out to us with questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, friends. Best of luck on your journeys, and we hope to connect with you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
I did that.